Inspiration also comes from research and my engagement with archival collections. Many of the materials that I incorporate into my work are materials that I've worked with previously with permission from the archive. But they're also based on my experiences growing up in my community here in Winston-Salem before working in other archives in Savannah, Georgia. So I talked a little bit about that a long time ago. I wrote this article for Archival Outlook. It was actually in 2018. I was just coming off of a residency at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where I created a series of 10 prints and I embedded QR codes in those prints, linking back to collection materials that I'd worked with or processed as a project archivist with the WW Law collection. And so in the article, I talked about how I was inspired to become a librarian based on my first job, my first engagement with libraries here in Winston-Salem. And that actually took place at the Malloy Jordan East Winston Heritage Center here in Winston-Salem. And so if you visit the center, you can see that there are a lot of black and white photos that line the walls in the library. And so that was actually my first job. I was there as a page. And I was working there, and I knew my mother went to or attended Atkins, one of the high schools here in Winston-Salem. And so I didn't see her senior picture. So I ran home and I asked her about it. And that's when she told me that during her senior year was the time that they were busing students out to other schools to integrate. And so her senior class was known as the class that never was. And so it made me a little sad, but it also kind of stuck with me because from that moment on, I realized that gaps in collections and the absence of materials also tells a story. And so that later inspired me to go into archives and to pursue this career. And so I wrote about the project that I did at SCAD about the 10 prints, where I was fusing art with art, and also how that kind of leads into like more engagement with the community and making connections and things like that. So the goal is to create primary sources that are available to multiple on multiple educational levels. And so when you have art leading that, and usually viewers see something visual, it kind of brings them in initially, and then the hope or the goal is for them to later scan the QR code and then find digitized primary sources, which tell a deeper story of what they're actually seeing. When I returned home, I had the opportunity to, I was invited to attend a panel session at the library where I initially worked. And so it was a great opportunity to connect with other community members that have served and given their time in support of this particular branch. And so I was invited as a panelist. And in the middle is Mr. Tim Jackson, who was a longtime branch manager who was there when I was a page. And so he was really excited to learn that I became a librarian. And so having engaged with the community and having worked with a lot of collections in Georgia, and then moving back to Winston-Salem and engaging with collection materials here, I learned about Peter Oliver. I always knew about Old Salem and the history there, but growing up, very young in Winston-Salem, I did not know of the African American experience in Old Salem. And so when I relocated and I came back, I learned more about all of the things that were going on and the activities that were surrounding the celebration of Peter Oliver's life. And so I was compelled to create this artist book, and it's currently held at Wake Forest University CSR Special Collections. Um, and so I want to kind of walk you through what the process was of creating this artist book. I kind of started with Old Salem, just visiting the historic district, engaging with their archives. And if you're not familiar with Old Salem, it was originally settled by the Moravian community in 1766. And Old Salem's history is deeply intertwined with the experiences of enslaved and free people of African descent. And so there they have the Hidden Town Project at Old Salem Museums and Gardens. And the purpose of that project is to uncover the stories of individuals and their contributions to the town's development. And so on the right is a piece that I made to go along with the artist book, talking a little bit about Peter Oliver's life, a little bit about the artist book, the materials that it's made of, and then also the research that kind of went into creating the artist book. So, over the course of Peter Oliver's life, through the membership in the Moravian Church, he was able to masterfully navigate the rules of his enslavement to secure terms by which he was able to create a life for himself and his family that afforded him some improved conditions and some sort of improved quality of life. And so, Peter Oliver was accumulated considerable savings from his pottery and from performing other tasks. His memoir reveals that he was true to his calling and work, and he brought it through diligence in his work to the point that he could buy himself out of slavery. And so once I learned more about the Peter Oliver story, of course, there's a lot more to that. This is just a brief summary for the sake of time here. I was able to connect with Creative Corridors and kind of learn more about what they were doing to celebrate the life of Peter Oliver. And this is God's Acre, where he's currently laid to rest. And so I received a scholarship. At the time, I was the director of printmaking at the Sawtooth School for Visual Art. And so I traveled to Penland on that scholarship to take a ceramics class where I had the intention of creating an artist book about Peter Oliver. And so in 2023, I visited Penland to take the class entitled Stories Around the Table with Sue Terrell, who's an amazing ceramicist who tells stories through her pottery. And so I learned the sgraffito technique while I was at Penland. And so prior to going to Penland, I researched the documents and papers from Peter Oliver, and I captured what I thought I wanted to include, but I really didn't know how this was going to turn out because I had not worked with pottery for many years, and so I was a little nervous, but somehow it turned out pretty well. So this is a lunch and learn. So I thought I would share the first thing that we did when I arrived at Penland and after settling in and meeting my classmates and my instructor. Our first assignment was to create a pie dish out of ceramics. So it was sort of a low stakes assignment, not too much pressure, with the idea that we would bake a pie at the end of the class. And so these are all the pies that I made. Well, I made the one on the right, but all the pies that my class made for our last assignment. And so this is my cohort. And the pie dishes that they made, and also our instructor who's in the middle. And my time at Penland was very special. I had time to just disconnect from everything and just focus on this artist book. And so I actually spent 2 weeks there. living there and dining and meeting other artists. And sometimes in the afternoons, there would be artists who would come to our studio and play music on the porch. And so I'm going to attempt to play a little sample of what I experienced at Penland. So as you can see, we had a wonderful time. um, Lots of different backgrounds and artists that had other talents, and we just shared with each other and enjoyed our time there. So these are some images from Penland where I was actually engaged in the process of creating the artist book. And as you can see, although I'm working with porcelain, hardened clay, I'm still using a lot of the printmaking tools that I use in linoleum. So it came really natural to me to create the marks on the plate, to create this artist book, and also my sketches, thinking about Peter Oliver's family, and then also what I photocopied from the archive, some of the actual memoirs and documents from the archive telling about his life. And so this was the final result after the glaze was laid on and scraped away, and you let it kind of harden a little bit, and then you put the clear glaze on and then fire. This was the result. And so I created an image of Peter Oliver's family, but I also drew from my research at the museum and the special collections at Old Salem. So looking at the pottery there and pulling some of the Moravian motifs from that pottery to signify some of the children as birds who did not survive, but also thinking about flowers and renewal and some of the meaning for some of the motifs that were originally in some of the early pottery. And I also took inspiration from jugs that were on display. And so if you look at the image of Peter Oliver's wife, you can see the similarities between some of the pottery that I observed and took note of during my research. And so, one of the other experiences that was really special at Finland is that we had a chance to engage in a field trip, actually, more than one field trip. And so, I had a chance to meet Jim McDowell, who calls himself the Black Potter, very well renowned jug maker. While we were in the area, we visited his studio and he talked about his art, and we met his wife. So this was just a special surprise, considering I was making this artist book about Peter Oliver, and then having the opportunity to meet Jim McDowell. And so the first thing he always says is that my face jugs are ugly because slavery was ugly. But he talked about his great aunt Evangeline, who was a slave potter in Jamaica. And so definitely thinking about the hurricane there, I'm just hoping that his family's okay. Um, and so Jim gave us a tour. He talked about how jugs were used to make graves for enslaved people as headstones, because they weren't allowed to have headstones. And so that's where that tradition came from. And I thought it was really significant that he said sometimes he makes jugs to honor a person who has achieved greatness. And so that's the way I thought about my artist book as well. And so these are just some more images of his studio and his work. And this is the back of the plate. for this artist book, I embedded another artist book that I made while at Penland, and I included some of the photocopied documents from my research, which actually kind of highlight some of the documents that were significant to Peter Oliver. And so you can see his signature there. This is a pamphlet stitch binding for that artist book. And these are his emancipation papers. So through Creative Quarters, I was able to exhibit this work at some of the programming that they were having in honor of a documentary that was produced by Wake Forest, telling the story of Peter Oliver. And I actually had a chance to meet some of Peter Oliver's family. So they're direct descendants of Peter Oliver. I don't know what was said before this picture was snapped, but we were really excited to meet each other. And this is Miss Sandra Brown, who's a descendant of Peter Oliver. So the next artist book I'd like to talk about, are we over time? Oh, okay. Is To Tell Her Glories with a Faithful Tongue. This is also held at ZSR Special Collections. So this artist book was really interesting also. It was partially funded by the Samuel T. Gladding Fund. And Samuel T. Gladding was a chair and a professor of the Department of Counseling at Wake Forest University. On the right is one of the rare books that I was able to engage with, poems by Phyllis Wheatley, as inspiration for this artist book. And so To Tell Her Glories with a Faithful Tongue pays homage to the literary and cultural contributions of Black women writers through the lens of archival material, analysis, and letterpress printing. This work of art in the book form features student texts inspired by course readings and analysis of primary sources from special collections, including the Maya Angelou Film and Theater Collection, Phyllis Wheatley's poems and pamphlets. And To Tell Her Glories with a Faithful Tongue embodies connectivity of thought, creativity, ideas, and reflection through poetry, letterpress, printmaking, and materiality. And so these are just a few of the required readings that students had in the class that I engaged with through the residency. So unlike some of my other artist books, which rely specifically on primary sources from archival collections, this artist book was a little bit different because students were actually reading contemporary work. So that was really exciting for me to kind of think about archives, but also contemporary writings based on the experiences in Black thematic areas of thought and study. And so I met with Dr. Ryan Bowie, who teaches English 381 that semester, and we talked a little bit along with Megan from Special Collections, and we talked about how we were going to just develop this, residency with me engaging with students in this class. And so students were organized into smaller groups of 3 to 4 members. And the goal was for students to think about the project as leaving behind their archival record or imprint about the work of Black women. What they learned was to create content using letterpress printing. They had fun experimenting, and they were able to take home several copies of their broadsides that they printed as a memento of the course. And so at the end, groups receive approximately 10 to 15 minutes of class time to describe their process and present the finished product. Yes. So these are some images from my residency. There, I had a chance to bring several of my artist books to the class, and students were able to engage with my work. They also made several visits to special collections to view broadsides and pamphlets. Um, yeah, just talk with each other and kind of get an idea about what primary sources are and also think about the history of the book and also traditional printmaking methods. Students also work with Craig Fansler, preservation librarian at Wake Forest, and spent a great deal learning about how to set type, which we were all really excited and proud that they navigated the curb so well and jumped right into it. So this is just a little clip of what the press looks like in action. And so this is an example of one of the broadsides that I would later incorporate into my artist book. And as you can see, students were experimenting with both image and text. And this image on the right just shows the intense, typesetting process. And they, like I said, they delved right in and they did a wonderful job. And you can even see how they experimented with different fonts to create movement in their work and also expression. So there was a lot of multi-layered meaning and learning that took place during their engagement with the printing press, but also with special collections and primary sources and poetry. And so after students created their broadsides, that's where my work began because I had to think about how I was going to encapsulate their work in an artist book, but also contend with or represent some of the um, ideas from the required readings. And so you can see The Age of Phyllis. I took inspiration from the required readings. So I would tell the students, we're all in this together. Like, as you're learning, I'm learning. We're all learning new information and exploring. So it was definitely an exploration for them, but also for me. And so this was is the final result of the project, which is the artist book. And you can see that I've incorporated a little bit of my printmaking, but also other materials that kind of lend to some of the readings and the primary sources that we engaged with during the course of the residency. And then I affixed the poems from the three groups on the inside. So when you open it up, it's an accordion and you can actually read their poems. At the end of the residency, I had the chance to meet Dr. Gladding's wife, Miss Claire Gladding, and talk to her and share my artist book, but also with everyone that was invited to see the final result. We also had materials that students viewed from the collection out as well, so you could see original drafts of I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings from Dr. Maya Angelou was out, and yeah, it was just a really good time to kind of reflect and share the artist book with the community, and so students can also see the finished work as well. So whenever I'm participating in a residency, I think one of the highlights for me is engaging with students and also just seeing how their minds work and what they learn from engaging with artist books as objects. And so I wanted to share one of the student reflections with you. And basically, the student said, raising a Black boy makes you sit down and think. Maya Angelou once said, in the same way, our special collections piece compelled us to pause, reflect, and honor Maya Angelou's profound and intricate legacy as a mother. As someone terrible with names, my group project not only allowed me to memorize those of my three hardworking members, but also allowed me to understand our abilities, ushering us to craft a project that incorporated the ideas and work of all. We succeeded, and alas, the birth of Angelou's son led to the birth of our work. So thank you for letting me share. And I'll leave this slide up for a little while. If you'd like to view my presentation for my residency at Wake Forest, you can scan the QR code on the left. And if you'd like to visit my website to see some of my other artist books, I invite you to scan the QR code on the right. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's really interesting. We
Absolutely.
have time for questions
Hey.
or comments. We've got some hand claps. So if you have questions, it's fine if you want to put them in chat and I will read them, or if you want to unmute yourself and share them, that is also okay. I love your multimedia and collaborative approach to making artist books, is one of our comments.
Well,
Yeah,
you.
I do. I did find it was nice to hear you talk about, all the different ways you've all the ways you've been a student and all the ways you've interacted with others. We have a question that it seems like a lot of your work has been more solo. What was it like to work with and alongside a whole class?
Oh, it was great. I have participated in other residencies where I have worked with a class, particularly at Ohio University. Students engaged with one of my other artist books, and they were in a museum studies class. And so their assignment was to not only investigate and research the object for their class, but they also had to hang the artist book in a curated exhibition. And so I had a chance to go to Ohio University, meet some of the students who were engaged in that class, but then also um, I facilitate workshops. And so I talk about artist books and I work with students, but I also teach them how to make artist books. And so that was another opportunity for me to engage with students and the community. But I definitely enjoy working with students. And also that comes from my background as a former head of special collections at SCAD. So I managed the special collections there. And so I was always used to kind of engaging with students who came to special collections to see materials. So yeah.
Great. We do have, I have a question, and then we also have another question in the chat. How do you source materials when you begin an artist book?
It in a lot of different ways. Sometimes the research comes first, and then sometimes the artist book comes first because I'm inspired by so many things. Mostly, my mind is always kind of like working when I'm processing collections. I'm absorbing a lot of information, and I also have a chance to see, and as you all know, when you're processing you're a lot of materials that a lot of people have not had a chance to engage with or know about. And so I think that kind of fuels my initial inspiration to create an artist book, because I come across something and I'm like, this is great. Like, I want to share this with a lot of people. I can create an art piece about it, or I can create a work of art about it, or artist book about it. But sometimes I'm inspired just by object forms or a specific bookbinding technique. So it could be, the tacketed binding technique. I was inspired by that by learning about a book that was discovered in a pot by a farmer. And so, like, oh, wow, there's something, really interesting about this specific bookbinding technique in history. And so that might inspire me to create an artist book about, another subject, but utilize the binding technique. So it varies. It varies. It's sometimes the inspiration comes from the archives, but then also it could also come from bookbinding techniques and how they are specific and integral to history and the history of the book. So yeah.
We have a question. How do you preserve and store the artist books,
Um,
especially if you have a lot of them?
well, I think having managed special collections and having purchased artist books for a collection, I am familiar with some of the ways that other artists you know uh, have created enclosures, but then also having to navigate how to figure out ways to preserve artist books if there isn't a pre-made archival box to put it in. So I've had to get creative, and I've had conversations also with Craig Fansler at Wake Forest, who preservation librarian. So he does this all the time. And so when I created To Tell Her Glories, it was like, okay, Craig, you're gonna have to create the box for this. But you get creative and you figure out ways. And I think also having a background Craig's laughing. Also, I think having a background in art and having taken package design, I can kind of create things and be creative with two or three archival box lids and put them together to create an innovative way to kind of store an artist book if it's an unusual shape or size, or if it calls for special preservation long term.
Stephanie said that she loved the opportunity to think about the possibilities of intertwining art and archives. So thank you.
Thank
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that is a good that is a good thing for us to pause about in this profession. My question was, I was wondering, in doing the research
you.
for your books, in doing that archival research, has it ever been the case that doing that research, changed or gave you more perspective or something like that on, doing archive on being the person doing archival research, right? Like as an archivist also, but then you're doing it from the perspective of the people that are, coming in to use our materials. You know what I'm saying? Has that ever kind of made you think about things differently or
It has, and I think I really had an opportunity to kind of dwell on that when I created, um, or when I created work for my solo exhibition, where I was actually performing the genealogy instead of being the person that's assisting someone with genealogy, and
right?
having to go to Chapel Hill where my family's records are stored and be the researcher, and feeling all of the feelings that you feel when you're on a timeline and you're trying to find something, and you're traveling from out of town and you only have 2 days. Usually I'm on the opposite side of the desk. But when the shoes are on the other foot, now it's not as if I didn't have any empathy for researchers before, but when it's your family and it's personal, you definitely can see research through a different lens. And I think that also has helped me, more as a reference librarian, because sometimes, we're not the researcher, we're the one that's assisting. But when the shoe's on the other foot, you definitely can learn a lot about how to help researchers when you've kind of experienced it yourself.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, Lydia says that she loved your talk. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
She is
you.
curious when you're working with an individual's personal archives and then their descendants are able to experience your art, how do
Mhm.
they interact with the art and what kinds of emotions does it bring up? Do you keep them in mind when you're creating or are you focused more on the individual?
That is a really good question. So with the Peter Oliver artist book, when I had a chance, one of the things that I wanted to do with the collection was donate one of the bowls to the family. So I'm, especially when it involves enslavement or a subject matter, that's what I would consider, kind of heavy or controversial. I always think about the family, and I always try to reach out and get any types of permissions, that I need to be respectful. But I really was adamant about coming back and donating one of the bowls to the family. And so when I was connected with Miss Sandra Brown and I had a chance to talk with her, and it was the family's first time seeing the work at that program event. Um, I was just really grateful that they really felt connected to it. She said she'd never really seen um, or seen how the story was told visually, like artistically. And she said she loved the work. And so for me, I'm always keeping in mind if it were someone talking about, my family. Um, ways to be, just respectful and think about how they might feel about the story that you're telling and the angle that you're telling it. And even with the tobacco tapestry, I included my great grandmother's photo in that tapestry, and I had reservations about it because I knew she would be in the museum. People would be looking at her, and even though it's a photograph, I still felt I needed to protect her. I included I printed some Adinkra symbols on a piece of a napkin, a vintage napkin, and I wrapped her photo in the napkin. Or I wrapped it around the piece that enclosed her photo. So it was just my way of, providing some protection for her in that environment. So I try to do that as well when I'm working or creating pieces about other people's family legacies.
Thank you. I know there's one more question, and I've lost track of my chat. There we go. Someone did ask. Oh, Herbert asked, how many of your books do you keep for yourself, or are they all for the specific institution or family you created them for?
So with the Peter Oliver artist book, it's just one collection. So I didn't create a preservation copy for myself, but I started off after I had the solo exhibition. I way more ambitious than I should have been. And I had these large editions. So one of my artist books was an edition of 10 and it's huge. And I made 10. And since then I've kind of minimized that a little bit. But I always try to make a preservation copy or keep a preservation copy because I think about exhibitions that I might want to do, or if someone would want to loan it, and if it's at an institution, they can just loan it from me. And then also, once I create these artist books, after so much time has passed, if it's an edition, I'm never going to create it again. And so I don't remember the steps or anything. I have to write them down because a lot of it is just, intuitive. And so I usually try to create or incorporate a preservation copy in my edition. So I have one for just about every artist book that I've created so far.
Great. Well, we have a little more time. If
Awesome.
people have other questions, you can add them. I have one more housekeeping thing that I am going to see if I can share this image, and we'll see how that goes. Oh goodness. Nope, not that. Basically, I wanted to tell you about an upcoming event essentially, and I really don't see what I'm trying to share. I wanted to tell you all that we are having a SNCCA show and tell, a pinch of history, food and cooking collections across North Carolina on Wednesday, November 12th at 12 p.m. And it's going to be um, using WebEx2. And we are still, if you're interested in sharing something, we are still, letting people sign up for that. But just putting that on people's radar. I might be able to add this image into the chat is probably what I can do. Yeah. Anyone else got any questions? Okay. All right. Well, um, people say thank you. We
Oh,
are
thank
all very excited that you were able to come join us.
thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. Um, I guess I will mention too, since I do have the time and I haven't found how to attach this yet. I will mention that I know you were part of I think you were at NCLA recently that you were I was gonna say that you spoke, but you were like, do you want to say something about I know not everybody here was there. Thank you,
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you very much. Patrick put the info about that other event in the chat. I appreciate that, Patrick. Yeah, do you want to tell us just briefly what your role was in that?
Yeah. So yes, I was invited to be in discussion with Demarius Johnson, who is a co-editor for the Coffee Table book, Picturing Black History. And so in our discussion, we talked about how Demarius Johnson and some of his colleagues from Ohio State University were invited to the Getty Image Archives, and how they selected and curated several images, but also pulled in different photographers and historians to write essays about some of these never before seen, but some also familiar um, photographs throughout history, really. And so, yeah, it was an opportunity to kind of talk about um, photography as a medium, um, highlighting like social change and also the history of photography and some unknown stories, backstories about some of the photographs that we're really familiar with, but then also how contemporary photographs have kind of like evolved and changed the trajectory of what we kind of associate with Black history. So yeah, it was a great conference. I had a chance to meet a lot of other librarians and archivists across the state, and Damaris was available to sign copies of purchased books after the keynote address. So, and they are available at Bookmarks here in Winston-Salem.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, Patrick, do you have is there a link for the show and tell forthcoming? Do you have a comment on that?
A link will be sent out to the listserv, added to the SNCCA website as well as SNCCA social media.
So yeah, a little closer to the date.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today. And yes, okay. I guess that's it. I guess we're wrapped up. I'm sure that if you think of other things later, I'm sure Sauda would be happy to converse with you. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye bye.